Good morning, everyone joining us from the Western Hemisphere, and good evening to all of you joining us from the eastern part of the world. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome each one of you to this most important day in the rare disease community, Rare Disease Day in 2022. Many of you would be joining towards the end of multiple events, and many of you are just beginning your day, and we are so grateful that you could join us and spend time with IndoUSrare at our Rare Disease Day event. The theme this year is celebrating 30 years of rare disease treatment, specifically focusing on the importance of global collaborations. Sadik, if you could just share the slides, I'm not sure that's coming up. Thank you. Yeah, we could move ahead. Thank you. Yeah. So the theme of today's event here is celebrating 30 years of rare disease treatment. And we have a very special session at the end. So please do stay tuned. Next slide, please. We'd like to start off by giving thanks to our sponsors, our gold sponsor, Sanofi India, and our silver sponsor, Astrogen, and a special thanks to our tech team today, Ibentos Global, who's helping us through this event as well. Moving on to give you a brief background of where IndoUSrare is situated in the rare disease space. We are a non-profit 501c3, a public charity, and we are on a mission to accelerate affordable therapies for rare disease patients globally. And how we want to do this is by catalyzing cross-border collaboration for all stakeholders of rare diseases. And India, and which represent the Eastern and Western hemispheres. Next slide, please. The specific problem that we address at IndoUSrare is the severe lack of global diversity in clinical trials. As you can see from this map, we see that most of clinical trials that happen across the world are concentrated in the US and the EU, and countries like India or Africa are far, far behind. And this is a specific issue that we want to address at IndoUSrare. Next slide, please. This massive health inequity where there is gross underrepresentation of one of the world's most populous country and other counterparts in low and middle income countries such as India is what IndoUSrare addresses. And this is a link or this is a preview of a PR release that just came out that highlights what we do and that shows the work that we do and the importance that we have placed for cross-border collaborations and connections between various stakeholders who do such good work in their own spheres. Next slide, please. A brief overview of all the programs that we have through which we are trying to address this inequity. Our Patient Alliance membership program, our flagship program, through which we make connections between patient groups in the US, India, and elsewhere. Our Patient Concierge, which is a scalable platform, which is technologically enabled that helps to address information support, assistance for patients and caregivers across the globe, particularly focusing on areas like India and the Indian diaspora globally. Our Corporate Alliance program, which is of particular interest to companies that have business interests in India and the surrounding regions. We have a number of awareness and education programs, such as the Art for Rare, which we will be getting into today, later today. We have newsletters and a number of webinar series, which are of interest to rare disease patients and other stakeholders throughout the year. We also have a number of research programs focusing again on collaborative projects between the East and the West. And these are a few of our programs that are currently underway. We also do advocacy, and our main ask everywhere that we go is increased collaborations and increased partnerships in bilateral relations, specifically for the case of rare diseases, gene therapy, and often therapy development, so that everybody together can address this global problem, which is rare diseases. Next slide, please. So how can you partner with us? You can write to us and reach out to us through our patient concierge. You can join our patient alliance program and partner with us in our vision and mission. You can join a corporate alliance if you're a company, or simply just subscribe to our newsletter to stay engaged and informed of what we do. We are interested in partnering and collaboration, so you can reach out to us or refer those who might be looking for such partnerships. You could fill out a volunteer form on our website and join hands with us in the work that we do. Of course, inviting everyone to engage with us on social media, where we highlight the work that we do and those of interest and the amazing work that our partners and others do in the rare disease space. Please also write to us at admin@IndoUSrare if you have any concern and if you would like to partner with us in any of the above ways. Next slide, please. Yeah, coming to today's event, Rare Disease Day 2022. It's my pleasure to invite our founder and chairman of the board, Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, to take over as the host of this event and take you through this journey. Thank you. Over to you, Harsha.
Thank you so much, Nisha. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome each one of you to IndoUSrare 3rd Annual Rare Disease Day celebration. What a momentous day and milestone. We have hit 30 years of approval of some major orphan drugs, which have saved thousands of lives. And with us today, we have a legend in rare disease that is going to deliver the keynote speech, followed by a message from the Ministry of Health in India, followed by several key opinion leaders, especially from important organizations from United States, as well as a panel discussion with Centers of Excellence for Rare Disease in India. So we have a great program ahead, and I'm honored to be your host today for the next couple hours or so. And I take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Sanofi and Esragen, for supporting this program, as well as all our partners that have been instrumental in bringing this program together. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker of today, Frank Sasinowski, who needs no introduction. He's a legend in rare disease and orphan drug approvals. He spent his early career as a public health a regulatory attorney at the Food and Drug Administration and was instrumental in implementation of the Orphan Drug Act of 1983. He's currently the director at Hyman Phelps McNamara. He's the founding board director of IndoUSrare, and we are very honored to have his advice and guidance at our organization. He's also served on the board as a chair and vice chair of the National Organization for Rare Disorders in the United States for 16 years. And has been conferred Lifetime Achievement Award by NORD and several humanitarian awards, including a presidential recognition. So without further ado, Frank, take it over, please.
Well, thank you, Harsha. I'm deeply honored to be here at the 3rd Annual IndoUSrare Rare Disease Day. I've been working in the field of rare diseases for nearly 40 years now. And the thought that you, Harsha, had this idea to integrate, to bring into a global collaboration, you know, the India diaspora, as well as the 1.6 billion people in the Indian subcontinent, and work them together into this global community, working to alleviate the suffering of our sisters and brothers with rare diseases. My hat's off to IndoUSrare and to you, Harsha, and I'm honored to be here. Could I have the first slide? So, and I'll move on to the next slide, if you don't mind. So what I would like to do today is talk to you about why you should be interested in rare diseases. If you're participating in the program, you probably have some sense, but I'm going to try to give you some more reasons why. And then I'm going to talk to you about why I'm so optimistic about the future after spending all my time in this field. And I want to share with you a few lessons that I've learned over my career in this field. Next slide. So why should you care about rare diseases? If I talk to you, and there are something in the United States, we define rare disease as those with that affect fewer than 200,000 people in the United States. And each year there are more rare diseases identified, because we keep doing more genetic screening across the population, and we keep discovering more and more rare diseases. The current estimate is that there are from 7,000 to 10,000 rare diseases. If I were to mention any one of these diseases to you, you'd probably have never heard of it. Yet, there are 25 to 30 million Americans with a rare disease. That would mean, if you were to put it into the India, that would mean something like there are 100 million people in India with a rare disease. And that means that in India, if you know 16 people, you probably all know 16 people. That means you probably know somebody with a rare disease. So each individual rare disease is virtually unheard of. And yet, when you think of them in the collective as an aggregate, it's virtually impossible that you have not come in contact with a family member or a close friend who has, or a colleague who has had or is suffering with a rare disease. And the tragedy is that about 50% of people with rare diseases affect children. Those children who have rare diseases, something like 1 in 3 of them don't make it to the age of 5. But it's more than 90% of these rare diseases don't have an FDA approved therapy. It's more like 95%. And one other thing is that 80% of these are genetic diseases, and that's going to be important for what we're going to be talking about later on. Next slide, please. So the tragedy, or the complication of having a rare disease is not only do you have a rare disease, but it's more complicated because it's very difficult to get access to care. People have never heard of the disease. If you do have to get care, you might have to travel a long distance. It's very hard to get informed care. And often almost always, there's no therapy for you. And then even before that, there's the cost and time in getting diagnosed. I gave a talk for the National Organization for Rare Disorders almost 20 years ago, in which I said it's a tragedy that it takes so long for people to get diagnosed. And then NORD, we did a survey of that, and I'm going to talk about it later on. But the highlight is that generally it takes about 7 years to get a correct diagnosis. And many times you get a misdiagnosis before you get an accurate diagnosis. So there's the heartache of knowing that things aren't right, but you can't figure out what's wrong, and nobody in the medical community can tell you what's wrong. So you are left with this great uncertainty. And often, in fact, people feel guilty because the community will think, well, if we can't diagnose you, then maybe it's just all in your head. It's psychosomatic. And that's certainly not true. So it creates an emotional burden for the person with the condition as well as their families. Next slide. So again, this is what I was just talking about. We talk about the diagnostic odyssey, that it's an odyssey. It's a long time sometimes to get diagnosed. And then when NORD in 2020 did a survey, it found that 28% of people said it took more than 7 years to get their diagnosis, and 38% said they had a misdiagnosis before they actually got the correct diagnosis. The chart that I show here shows on the left, it's by income brackets, how many people considered relocating in order to be closer to care. And then on the right, it shows people who never considered relocating. And you'll see that there's the people who have the least economic ability to consider relocating are the ones who most often consider relocating in order to get access to care. Remember, 50% of the time it's children. So families are thinking about moving in order to have their child be closer to somebody who understands their disease and can provide care. And as often it's the people who have the least ability to relocate. So there's a disproportionate burden that falls on those who are least able to shoulder that burden. Next slide. And the total cost, I'm vice chair of another patient organization, the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. And we just issued last year, just finished a national survey. And what we determined is that when we looked at about half the rare diseases, we found that that there was a direct and indirect cost to the US of nearly $1 trillion being the cost of the rare diseases. And that's just based upon what 50% of the rare diseases or the population with rare diseases. So it might actually be closer to 2 trillion. Next slide, please. And more than half of that comes from loss of productivity. So it's not only a direct and indirect economic cost, and I'm just speaking about the US. I don't have any ability to project that to India, but you can make extrapolations on your own. But if you look at that, that's just the direct and indirect cost, but almost half of that is due to the loss of productivity. So not only do we have costs associated with rare diseases, but we also lose human potential, that we're losing out on the productivity, on the contributions that could be made by our sisters and brothers who are affected with rare diseases. Next slide, please. So now that I've told you, and of course, the cost of rare disease therapies are themselves high. And I think we all know that. This slide illustrates that. I'm sure Harsha and IndoUSrare will make all of these slides available to you. So I don't try to read my slides, but I present them as a resource for you to dive into with greater depth, should you have an interest in any topic that's on any one of these slides. But can we go to the next slide? So now that I've told you about why you should be interested and in rare diseases, I now want to share with you a little bit about why I'm so optimistic about the future. This is a slide that shows that from when I first started working at FDA in 1983 on rare diseases, that's the year that the Orphan Drug Act was enacted, and it started a global revolution in recognizing rare diseases as an entity. And you can see that in 1983, the FDA approved 2 therapies for rare diseases. And you can look at how the numbers have mushroomed, how they've grown quite dramatically. Look at the last 3 years. There were 80, 94, and 77 rare disease therapies. Now, a good portion of those, almost half, have been for cancers, rare cancers. But still, that means that even beyond rare cancers, which are very important, but also in non-cancer rare diseases, there have been a significant number of new therapies approved. So that's part of my reason for optimism. And the next slide shows you another reason. And that is that I also see that the number of companies that are asking the FDA for recognition that they have a therapy that might help a rare disease community, the number of designations is growing again dramatically from 1983 to the last year I had on here is 2019. So you can see that we're getting new therapies approved, and then the therapies that are in the pipeline that are still being developed, the numbers of those are going up too. So next slide. And now I want to transition from why I'm optimistic to really lessons that I've learned. And these lessons are, again, another reason for my optimism. You know, about 5 years ago, the woman, Dr. Janet Woodcock, who has been the acting commissioner of FDA for the last year and just recently moved in to become the principal deputy commissioner of FDA. She and I were the keynote presenters at a NORD summit about 5 years ago, and she exhorted everybody there to use more visual evidence, that we, in the classic sense of medicine and research, we don't usually use visual evidence. And she was saying, we are all a visual society. So why is it that we do not use more visual evidence? And she gave examples, like, for instance, if you're going to be recording a certain measure, often in certain diseases, you're going to look at how far a person can walk or what their gait looks like. So 6-minute walk or gait. You could take a videotape of a person at baseline and at the end of your study duration, and you could have an independent panel of blinded reviewers rate each of those pairs of videos and rate them according to, from the top, the person who had the greatest improvement from baseline, to the bottom, the person who had the least, and then see whether or not that ranking was due to chance more or less often than 1 in 20 times, which is the standard criteria for looking at whether or not it's statistically significant. Or you could look at whatever other endpoint you're looking at, like doing a 9-hole peg test, or maybe asking each patient, what is their most troublesome activity of daily living, or ADL? And you could ask them to perform that at baseline or at the end of the trial. So the last bullet I have on this slide is something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more. And that is that there are 2 therapies. Now there are 3. There are the first 2 therapies that were approved for a condition called spinal muscular atrophy. Spinraza in December 2016, which was signed by Janet Woodcock and I worked on. And then the first systemic gene therapy, Zolgensma, which was approved in 2019. I also worked on that one. Both of these were for a condition, type 1 SMA, that you might have heard of as a floppy baby. Can we go to the next slide? And in the bottom, do you see the infant who, against that yellow background, her or his head is tilted backwards, and you can see the nurse or the caregiver is holding their hands. You can see that infant has no body turgor. And that's what a baby born with type 1 SMA lacks, the ability to have any body turgor. That's why they're called colloquially floppy babies. Well, those pictures right above that baby are 8 of the first 12 subjects in the gene therapy trial that I helped on. This was at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. And it turns out that you can see that each of those infants is sitting unassisted. The very definition of a type 1 SMA baby is one who will never, ever be able to sit unassisted. Then look at that little boy in the lower right-hand corner. That's little Mateo. Little Mateo would have been a floppy baby. He was given this gene therapy at birth because he was diagnosed. And here he is. I showed the full videotape at a talk at the Vatican in May 2019. And in the front row was a man named Francis Collins, who was then director of the National Institutes of Health. And in 2000, one of his greatest achievements was breaking the genome, the human genome, breaking the genome code, the gene code. And as I played this little video of little Mateo walking down the hall of Nationwide Children's Hospital, standing on tiptoes to press the up elevator button, Francis Collins, I could see tears running down his cheeks. Because the man who had spent his lifetime breaking the human genome code so that we could all understand genetic diseases better, he saw for the first time proof that all of his life efforts meant something in the lives of a person. And that's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to take everyone who might have a rare disease, especially genetic one in India, try to get them into this worldwide collaboration. So hopefully we can start developing more therapies that will affect everyone like this. Can we go to the next slide? So another lesson that I learned from Janet Woodcock is that she taught us about that we should break down silos. We should start to think about running clinical trials in entirely different ways. We should have continuous and adaptive designs. We should not think traditionally. The biotech industry thinks of you run a phase 1 trial that might start with single ascending doses, then go to multiple ascending doses, then go to phase 2 where you select the right dose and find the right endpoints, and then go to pivotal phase 3 trials. And she was breaking that down and saying, no, you just think of this as a continuous program, and take a person who might qualify to be in your single ascending dose trial, have them then after a washout period go into multiple ascending dose, and then maybe from there after a washout go into their phase 2. So harness the power that you have with each individual who's going to qualify for your trial. Next slide. So and I think one of the most dramatic things that I've seen happen, and it was something I championed when I was at NORD and now at the Every Life Foundation, and of course with IndoUSrare, one thing I've championed throughout my career is to make sure that patient advocates have a seat at the table. I'm just telling you about the US experience. I can't speak from India, but in the United States, we had our first federal drug law passed in 1902, and yet it was more than 100 years later it took before the first US drug law ever even mentioned the word patient. Why? Because my view is that the development of new therapies was kind of a paternalistic venture. You know, that industry and researchers and academia would work with federal regulators to come up with therapies that would help patients who are suffering, but there was no role for the patient in that process. The patient was the beneficiary of the work that was done by industry, academia, and regulators, but there was no role for the patient. And I thought that was so wrong. In fact, 20 years ago, Francis Collins, the head of NIH, Janet Woodcock, and I were asked to be the 3 presenters at a weekend retreat for the vice presidents of research and development for all the big pharma companies. And my speech was, listen to the growing voice of the patient. That was 20 years ago. So next slide. What I want to do is give some illustrations. And here's one illustration. I helped in 2009 get the first drug approved for Huntington's disease. And that was one of the 2 diseases that stimulated patients to actually get the Orphan Drug Act passed. There was a famous folk singer in the United States, Woody Guthrie, who died of Huntington's disease, and his widow, Marjorie, along with Abby Myers, whose sons had Tourette's syndrome, which my son has, that the 2 of them collaborated and formed NORD. And so Huntington's disease has been at the forefront of rare disease issues. And I helped get the first drug approved for Huntington's disease, and we got it approved to treat chorea. Now, why did we do that in 2008? Because in 2015, I went to an FDA program in which FDA invited the patient organization that represents all patients with Huntington's, the Huntington's Disease Society of America, to present. They presented their results. They had done a survey of 200 neurologists and 200 patients with Huntington's. The neurologists all said chorea. Chorea is a movement disorder, kind of shaking, trembling. They all said that's the most important thing to a patient with Huntington's. What patients, though, on the other hand, said, no. The impact on cognition is the most important aspect of the disease because of the impacts on cognition, I can't fare as well in school. I can't hold a job. That's the most important thing. Other people might be a little scared about my trembling. I don't care about the trembling so much as I care about cognition. And so this is my illustration to you as to why it's important to involve patients in the process of developing therapies, because patients know better. Patients know what really matters to them. And so it's incumbent upon us all to make sure that patients have a legitimate full role, a voice in the development of new therapies. Next slide. And I'm going to give you another example. The FDA created a program called externally led patient-focused drug development meetings, in which the FDA will come to a meeting that's run by a patient organization. And right in the middle of this chart that I have is a disease called epidermolysa bullosa. And that was April 2018, FDA held a hearing. So go to the next slide. And it turns out in the fall of 2017, I was called by the patient organization that represents all people with this disease, EB. And they wanted to give me a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I said, you know, when people give me a Lifetime Achievement Award, it's usually because I helped get the first therapy approved for that disease. And it turns out that I wasn't even working on any drugs for EB. And they said, Frank, but you help on all rare diseases. A rising tide raises all boats. So we think that your work has done so much for us. And so I said, okay, I'll come under one condition, that I come to New York City, but I not sit with anybody from your board of directors of the patient organization. I not sit with anybody from industry, but I sit with patients. So when I came to that event in New York City, they had me sit between these two little girls. The one on the left is Ella Murray, and the one on the right is Rafi Copeland. Now you'll notice these two little girls, they both, you see Ella has her hands in her pockets. A baby born with EB is usually diagnosed at birth. When the midwife or the nurse takes the infant who's just been born from the mother to clean the baby, the newborn, the skin begins to fall off the newborn baby because there's no adherence between the skin and the skin sloughs off. The skin is as delicate as a butterfly's wing. And so it's sometimes called the butterfly disease. And you can see these little girls, there's skin, you see Rafi's legs, you see they're all wrapped like a mummy. Their fingers, they have lost the tips of their fingers, and their fingers have been fused together because the skin has adhered to one another. So when I found out at this dinner that the FDA was demanding that for a therapy to be approved, the company would have to show that a physician would rate the person's disease as having no lesions or nearly no lesions. That's the standard that FDA uses for looking at dermatologic diseases like psoriasis or acne or rosacea, common dermatologic conditions. But there's no way that these two little girls will ever have a therapy that will get them to 0 or 1. That is, to be clear of all lesions or nearly clear. So I called the FDA and I said, we need to do something about this. And the FDA then said, Frank, why don't you organize one of these externally led patient-focused drug development meetings? And we did. And we had that meeting in April 2018. And the FDA sent their 3 top leaders in dermatologic drugs. And without us even asking as a patient community, the FDA on its own published about 2 months later, a draft guidance on this disease, its first draft guidance, and nowhere did it ever say you need to have a therapy that gets a patient to 0 or 1. So what I'm talking about is this is a great illustration of how the voice of the patient can make a dramatic difference in being able to drive the research agenda and to have reasonable ways for us to evaluate therapies that will lead to the ability to have access to a new therapy. Next slide, please. So you can also do things like in your research, ask very simple questions that mean a lot, like a patient's global impression of the severity of their disease. You just have to ask it at the baseline, start of the trial, as well as at the end of the trial. It only takes a minute. So it's not a big burden on the patient to go through a long questionnaire or work through some sort of test of their skills. It's very simple, but can give you good information. So next slide, please. The FDA's first Rare Disease Day wasn't that long ago. It was 2012. And this woman, Tiffany House, has Pompe disease. She was embedded into the FDA review system for the first drug for Pompe, Myozyme. And when I talked to the FDA medical reviewers afterwards, I said, what did Miss House being with you teach you? And they said, you know, we thought that for a drug to be useful for a disease, you would have to show an improvement in those patients from the beginning of the trial to the end of the trial. What Ms. House taught us is that for a patient with a disease, a rare disease that is unilaterally progressive, their best day will be the day they're diagnosed, and they will get worse every day after that. So what she taught us, that it can be critically important if you can just maintain the same level of abilities as you had at the beginning. You don't need to improve them. Just stabilize their condition is a huge win. If you look very carefully, you'll see there's a man there with his head down, and he has a red tie. That happens to be me. I was going to speak next after this day. But anyway, so that's another example of how important it is to have the voice of the patient involved in the development of new therapies. Next slide. I'm going to go rather rapidly for the next ones because the FDA's probably two most controversial approvals, drug approvals in its history maybe, have come relatively recently. And that was when the FDA approved a drug for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, eteplirsen. And the role of the patient was very important, and I was involved in organizing that. It turns out I saw that the trial that the company had done only had 12 boys in it. By the way, DMD only hits boys. So it only had 12 boys in it. And two of the boys, the Willis twins, lost their ability to ambulate and were confined to wheelchairs weeks after they started in this trial. So there really were only 10 boys who could be evaluated. And it turns out that I thought this data set was very thin. So I thought we'd need to get more granularity. So I reached out to the patient community and I said, help me organize ways to kind of as systematically as we could gather evidence. And we did. We presented this evidence in a meeting to the senior FDA officials without the company being present. And I told the company, I represent you, but I'm not going to tell you what the patients are going to say, and you're not invited to come to the meeting. We want to have the patients be able to speak for themselves. So go to the next slide. I even asked the company to allow a patient representative, Christine McSherry, to take some of their time from their core presentation at an FDA advisory committee to present the patient voice. And I told the company, and you have no right to change anything that she's going to say. And they agreed. Next slide. And this is an example of what was presented. One of the women, Mindy, one of the mothers of one of these boys, Mindy Leffler, her son, Aiden, she charted how many times the boy spontaneously collapsed. Now, I'm not talking about tripping, like tripping over a rug. Boys with DMD, when their muscles can't support their body weight, they will be standing, and the next instant they will be on the floor because their muscles just give way. And they are so surprised, they're so shocked that all of a sudden they're on their floor, this spontaneous collapse. So Mindy, it's such a dramatic thing. She was charting this daily, how many times her son, and you can look at the results. When did he start on drug? And then what happened to how many times he had spontaneous collapses? This kind of information was not captured formally in the trial, but it helped to inform Dr. Woodcock, who made a decision to approve this drug. It was a very controversial decision because the data included data like this, which isn't the classic data that a trialist would demand. Next slide, please. But it shows the power of the patient voice. And that's why I'm talking to you today, because I'm talking to not only all the healthcare providers who care for patients in India, who do such dramatic, important work, and all the researchers who are out there in India who are doing this, but also the patients. I want to try to reach the patients to tell you how important you are in this entire process and why you should be interested in trying to get people to involve you in the process, to sign you up to a natural history. You're going to hear from Craig Martin. Global Genes started a rare X, kind of natural history, but there are natural histories on across almost for every disease. And so you should try to get your information into that. And maybe if you have a genetic disease, think about exploring to get into a trial for a gene therapy. Let's go to the next slide. So I also wanted to talk about how the first drug in a rare disease doesn't have to be the best drug. I helped create a program called Accelerated Approval that was developed by FDA when I was at FDA to address the AIDS crisis started in the mid 80s. And the first drug that was approved for AIDS, called AZT, it got approved, and then 2 other drugs like it got approved to make a 3-drug cocktail of antiretrovirals that actually turned AIDS from a death sentence into a chronic disease that it is today. And you in India should be very proud. A good friend of mine, Yusuf Hamid, the founder of Cipla, who the Indian government has called a living legend and given him that award. Yusuf Hamid did so much to make access to affordable antiretroviral drugs that millions of lives were saved in Africa. I've been to the toughest townships in South Africa. I've been to the slums in Nairobi in Kenya and visiting patients with AIDS. And I've seen so many orphans who have lost both their parents to AIDS. And if it were not for Yusuf Hamid and the company Cipla in India, I would have known much more suffering. So again, India should be very proud of all you've done. But the next example here is beta-seron, the first drug for multiple sclerosis. Again, it didn't have the best data, but because it was approved by Janet Woodcock, and I helped on that one, because of that, we now have more than a dozen multiple sclerosis drugs available for people with MS. And because of eteplirsen, that 2016 approval that I just talked about with the Jet Foundation, there are now 4 drugs for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, including a corticosteroid, a different drug class. And the most controversial maybe drug in FDA history was just approved last year. It was a drug for Alzheimer's, not a rare disease, Alzheimer's. But again, I think that if you go to the next slide, what I've learned from these experiences is that the first drug for a rare disease or for any serious disease where there's an unmet medical need, that the first drug doesn't have to be perfect for it to be a watershed moment, but it could be a glimmer of brighter days to come. Next slide. So I'm going back to spinal muscular atrophy for a second, because to show you how rapidly science is progressing, and you can be part of that and contribute to that. From the time that they discovered the gene for spinal muscular atrophy to the first therapy that I helped get approved, Spinraza, Janet Woodcock signed in December 23rd, 2016, it was just over 10 years. From the time they discovered the gene to the time we had the first drug approved based upon that genetic finding. And then the first systemic use of any gene therapy was Zolgensma. And you saw little Mateo. You saw those other 8 infants who were all sitting unassisted. And that was in less than 15 years. So you too can be part of this system. Next slide. What I wanted to say is that there's an untapped potential in India with 1.6 billion people. Most of the trials are right now, as was explained by Nisha at the beginning and Harsha, they're in the US and the EU. And there's a reason the FDA, the US has a sophisticated infrastructure for looking at novel therapies. And there's a big biotech and venture investments in the US to do this. But I think the untapped potential of India is you have people with rare diseases, you have great researchers here, great academic institutions, you have wonderful human resources. You can be integrated. So work with IndoUSrare. Do that, sign up to the Patient Concierge Program, sign up to the Patients Alliance, and try to get involved so that you can become part of the picture. And that's what I mean in terms of the patient registries too, which you're going to hear more about. Next slide. So the last slide is why I'm so optimistic that when I started on my career, in rare diseases about 40 years ago, no one had ever heard of rare diseases. Nobody had talked about them as rare diseases. It wasn't even recognized as an area of medicine. You'd have all these individual therapies, but now I can reach out and talk to you, my colleagues and friends in India, as well as in the United States, and we can work to make a global community that can address the unmet medical need. And especially because 80% of rare diseases have a genetic origin. Therefore, with a gene therapy, you can have a one and done therapy. That is, if you have that rare disease, maybe you might have an opportunity to come to the United States, be part of a gene therapy, get the gene therapy, be housed in the United States for some period of time to make sure there's no reactions to the gene therapy before returning back to India. There might be ways, but also getting all of your information into a natural history registry, regardless of whether or not you can have access. That will help everybody understand the disease better. So I just want to thank all of you for your time and attention, for being interested in participating in this IndoUSrare's 3rd annual Rare Disease Day. And I wish you the bless. The last thing I want to leave you with is a blessing. You're going to say, how can Frank leave us with a blessing? So the next slide, please. When I met with the Pope Francis, I told him about another drug I worked on, benznidazole, to treat Chagas, a very rare disease in his native Argentina that kills more in his Argentina than malaria. And at the end of my talk with him, I asked him for a blessing on all of our sisters and brothers around the world who are suffering with rare diseases, and on all of those of us who work to try to alleviate the suffering of our sisters and brothers with rare diseases. That is, in the medical community, in the research community, in the patient advocacy community. And Pope Francis gave me that blessing. And so I am conveying that blessing to you, to each one of you, whether you are a person with a rare disease, a family member of a person with a rare disease, or part of the care community that is either providing care or is involved in research or in the patient advocacy community. So each one of you has a papal blessing that you never knew about until right now. So a blessing. Namaste. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was an inspirational talk. Despite so many lifetime achievement awards, your commitment and hard work doesn't seem to cease or decrease. It's only increasing by the day. We really appreciate you continuing to be there for each one of us, to be responsive. Not a single email goes without a response. So really commendable and inspirational what you do. And thank you for sharing a piece of your wisdom with all of us today. Appreciate it. We have a few questions and we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to ask a couple. One question from Param from Sanofi is, the cost of prescription medication for rare diseases is the lowest cost among all the direct and indirect costs. Does this provide an opportunity to reset the mindset that direct drug costs for rare diseases is not the largest expenditure? And your views, please.
That's a very good question. And, it's one of the things that with the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases, that was our survey that we did. And that's one of the things we're taking to Congress. I mean, in fact, I gave a talk to the Congressional Caucus on Rare Diseases last Tuesday. And so that's one of the messages that we are conveying. And so I think that was an astute insight from that person who asked that question.
Absolutely. The second and the last question that we have time for is, what do you see as the most significant threat to continued progress in rare disease innovation globally? This is from Craig Martin of Global Genes.
Yeah, I'm so optimistic. I have the greatest respect for Global Genes, and so, Mr. Martin, I appreciate your question, and I'm so optimistic that your question stumps me, because what I see on all fronts is greater progress. I see greater research interest. I see greater investment. I see academic institutions. On Friday, I was the keynote speaker at UCLA's 2nd ever Rare Disease Day. And it turns out UCLA as an institution has created 2 precision medicine institutes within UCLA. I see the birth of so much progress and interest everywhere that I don't see a major stumbling block. I only see optimism.
Great. With that positive note, let's thank Frank again for making time and sharing so much insights. I'm sure Frank will be happy to answer any questions that remain unanswered today. So please share them with the admin at IndoUSrare, and we will try and get those answers to you. Thank you so much, Frank. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your blessings. With that, let's move to our next speaker today, Dr. Marshall Summer. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So Dr. Marshall Summer was appointed the chairman of the National Organization for Rare Disorders in 2016. He is an extraordinary physician scientist and is the director of the Rare Disease Institute at the Children's National Medical Center here in Washington, D.C. I recently had the honor and privilege of touring that incredible facility on a historic site. So it's really my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Marshall Summer to deliver this talk. Welcome, Marshall.
Thank you so very, very much, Harsha. And I don't know if IndoUSrare realizes what an incredible job you are doing and for your colleagues and for the rare disease patients in India. Can you see slides okay?
Yes, we can see that.
Excellent. So I have to open with this. My history with India goes back to 1970. When I was fortunate enough to go there with my parents. I'm actually the photographer in this and with my mother and father. And it's been gratifying to follow all the progress over the years, the many things that have been done. Of course, Frank's been involved with this from day one. I actually go back to about 1985 for when I got started in the rare disease and pediatrics world. What I want to talk about just a little bit is sort of bring you up to speed on how is this emerging as a field of medicine. So we've seen tremendous growth in recognized diseases. We're actually over 8,000 recognized conditions. And what I mean by that is where we have identified a change in DNA that matches up to a clinical phenotype. And we can't even keep up. And I actually did the math on this the other day, given how many we knew about around 2000 when we finished the Human Genome Project. I was one of the folks working with that way back when. And we've identified over 10 new conditions a week since the Human Genome Project finished. So it's unlike any other field in medicine where the growth is almost exponential, but it's so fast that a lot of the things we traditionally do in a field of medicine, when we're very conservative about how we do things, we have to throw by the wayside. So it's actually very exciting in some ways, but also presents some real challenges to how we've traditionally practiced medicine. We've got about 600 with a therapy right now. Then that doesn't mean the other 8,000 go untreated. It just means that we don't have a specific medication for those. So one of the things we try to work out is what conventional therapies are most effective for all of these patients, what new therapies need to develop, what are the gaps and things like that. And there's a lot of folks working on those things. Another thing's happening as well too. While we're recognizing more and more conditions, the survivability of our patients is going up. This is a study from Spain showing that deaths in patients with rare congenital anomalies has actually been going down since 1999. This is a real trend we're seeing internationally. Down syndrome, an easily recognizable condition, had an average life expectancy of 25 in the 1980s. It's now approaching 60. Sickle cell anemia, a disease we see commonly in both the African continent as well as in North America, has had a huge increase in life expectancy. Cystic fibrosis, the same thing, but we're seeing this across the board. And a lot of it is the work of pulling together best treatment practices, pulling together groups, natural history, getting that information about the disease so we know what the problems are we need to address. I would say almost all of these conditions benefited from having good, deep information about what these diseases look like. So sharing information, sharing standards of care, and those cross international boundaries just fine, and they cross languages just fine. So lots and lots we can do there. So is rare disease a unique field of medicine? I would argue that it is. The conditions are mostly genetic and lifespan in nature, Most medical conditions are either, a sudden onset or onset over a long period of time. With a rare genetic condition, you start with it, and that gene change, I mean, we're doing some cool new stuff, but for current purposes, is going to be with you. The diseases aren't limited to an organ or a specific system. One of the ways one of my colleagues described the medical genetics field is we're the world's most highly specialized generalists. I would have to agree with that. So these rare conditions actually affect every aspect of health, every aspect of physical development, and in many different ways. So you have to be willing to look at almost everything. The other is our evidence is based on a very different set of patients than normal medical evidence. If you're studying hypertension, you are not going to even be looked at if you don't have several 100,000 patients in your study. For some of our studies, we only have 5 patients. I actually have one patient I've seen. He is the only patient in the planet with his disease that we know of right now. So our incidence data is very limited. Our outcome data can also be limited. That's something everyone can help with. And then we have limited natural history data, which is another thing that we can all help with. The other thing is our families and patients are often really our best sources of information. If you have lived with this condition, if you know what it looks like, you know more about that maybe than anyone else on the planet if you are a family who's lived and worked with these conditions. So we have tremendous respect in our practice, in our medical practice, and our patients and families are really our partners. We work with them to try to figure out what's the best thing to do or what our diagnosis is. The care model is complex and often involves multiple specialties. We did a review recently of many thousands of visits, and patients with rare disease use more specialties than really almost any other type of patient, and over a longer period of time. So they see a lot of different folks, and care expertise is limited. But what it comes down to for some of this is actually getting that diagnosis. Obviously with symptoms, specific genetic disease, and treatment. And fortunately, I am pleased to say that since Frank's initial study, we have gotten a lot better than our 7 years initially. We still got a long way to go, and for some of our conditions, it can be way too long. But with the advent of newborn screening, as we've seen more and more improvements in genetic testing, we're able to get to diagnoses faster than we used to be. We still have a long way to go, though. The other thing you need to keep in mind about rare disease is that we are taking common diseases, and these are actually breaking down into smaller and smaller subgroups, which start to resemble rare disease. So the methods and the models that we develop in rare disease actually are going to be used more and more in common medicine. And breast cancer is a good example of this. 150 per 100,000 per year in the United States, but there's 30 different molecular subtypes. Those actually start to become rare disease subgroups in that, and with very distinct and different treatments. So precision medicine, whatever, personalized medicine, whatever you want to call it, is actually moving towards what we're already doing in rare disease. So we're blazing the trails for how do you do that. I took some data from children's. This is over 1.5 million visits over about a 3-year window. And what we found is that if you just come to a children's hospital for whatever reason, you're about 12% likely to have a rare disease. If you get admitted to the hospital, it's almost 20% of those patients have a rare disease. If you make more than 2 visits in that 3-year period to a children's hospital, you've got a 32% chance of having a rare disease. And we did base this off of their coding and things like that. So actually pretty common that you would have that. And so I think rare is a term we're stuck with, but it's a term that I think really doesn't paint a true picture. I can tell you there's almost no other condition other than maybe asthma that brings children to the hospitals more than rare diseases do. The cost for treating orphan disease, one of the things we've been looking at over the years, it runs typically around $84,000 a year for treating rare disease. Now, part of that is drug, but a lot of that are all of the other therapies, all of the other medical interventions, but also things like speech therapy, behavior development, all of the different things that do that. So it is obviously expensive. This is from 2018 from Evaluate Pharma. So also we have this new menu of types of treatments that are being developed that are very exciting. We've got organ transplant, liver and bone marrow. That one we've been doing for a while. Enzyme replacement, we've been doing for a while. Small molecules, which everyone forgets about those, but those can be incredibly powerful for treating rare disease. Substrate and product manipulation, and like the dietary manipulation we do for phenylketonuria. Alternate enzymology, using bacteria, using other things to actually try to replace that. We look at using the gut, messenger RNA. Gene therapy. Now, I've been around, like I said, since the mid-'80s. So gene therapy has been around since the mid-'80s. And the definitions keep changing. But the idea is that you're trying to add a correct gene back to a patient. And that's something we've been working on for a very long time. But then there's a whole new field of gene correction. And they're developing more and more sophisticated enzymes and systems that can go in and change a base that's not the right one. So lots of different things here. When we look at through the US FDA, the number of approvals, so I've got data up through 2020, about 58% are for rare diseases. Now, there's a chunk of those that are for rare cancers, which kind of goes to my point earlier, but actually for the other conditions as well too. So a lot of focus on rare disease drug development in the US right now and internationally. Our workforce is a bit problematic. So if we look at how many medical geneticists per population, in most European countries, it's about 1 geneticist per million patients. So kind of spread a little bit thin there. And it can go down as much as 1 in 4.5 million. So that means that if we're trying to use the old medical model where we see every patient physically face-to-face and do that, we just simply don't have a large enough workforce to do that, which is one of the things that impacts time to diagnosis. If you have to wait a long time to get in to see someone, that's to me one of the key pressure points in the field, and one of the things we're trying to make the most progress on. One of the things we learned from COVID is we ran an experiment we otherwise would not probably have run, which is the use of telemedicine. And what we found is that it actually does work very nicely, that we can reach patients in almost any location, and those electrons are really fast going back and forth, and we can really get higher quality visits for our patients. So the field of rare disease has challenges. Now, more diseases, longer survival means more patients, which eventually the people paying for the care notice, because suddenly there are more patients with rare disease diagnosis who are living longer. We've got an explosion in treatments. We've got an explosion in diagnosis that's coming on board pretty quickly. Our patients are going from an acute to a chronic model. It used to be we would diagnose that. It was a very tough, sad thing, but didn't always last long. Now our patients are around for good long lifetimes. Geographic distance and access disparity between patients. We have some areas where we just don't have folks, and some places where we do. And so how do we actually fix that? Financial impact on the health system we talked about, and then workforce challenges. Challenge accepted. I think these are actually unique challenges that allow us to try different things. I think instead of trying to fit a model that was developed in the 1950s and 60s of medicine, we can do a lot better. And there's a lot of things going on. One is collaboration. We have to set up things across the board where we can talk to each other. New care models, technology. We should be using technology in this field more than any other. And of course, India leading in software development. I think you guys are really going to teach us some things. Harsha's, and I've had fun talking about this over the years, and he's done some unique things here. They have to involve the primary care providers. We will not have enough specialists to take care of these patients. So we have unique opportunities to break these molds. We're actually, like I say here, we don't have a choice. We have to break some of the molds. A lot of things going on. The NORD Clinical Centers of Excellence Network, which we just launched in the fall, is starting to provide a framework and definition for what it takes in a medical center to do rare disease. We have the World Health Organization Collective Global Network for Rare Disease, which I'm part of. We're trying to figure out how do we deliver care and diagnosis internationally. There's another one that I've been active in, which is a global commission to end the diagnostic odyssey for children with rare disease, which is a horrible name for a commission because it's way too long, but it's actually really fun work. The International Rare Disease Research Consortium, which is figuring out how to deliver new therapies and develop new therapies. Of course, IndoUSrare, yay, you guys. and a lot more things out there. So I really do appreciate your time today. Harsha, it's been an absolute honor to be allowed to speak here today. I know you've got a great group of folks here, and of course, following Frank's a tough act to follow.
Absolutely, Marshall. It was a great talk. Thank you so much for making time on this busiest and most important day of the year for you and everyone else. So appreciate you making time for this talk.
Honored to be asked.
Yeah. We unfortunately do not have time for Q&A, so we'll move on to the next speaker. Can we share the screen, please? We now have, I welcome Craig Martin, who is the CEO of Global Genes and the president of Rhythm Health. He's also the co-founder of RareX and is on the board of Fibrolamellar Cancer Foundation. My journey after I and my wife lost a child to a rare disease in 2012 began with going to conferences and rare disease day events to learn about what's going on, both at NORD and Global Genes. So met number of rare advocates at the Global Genes Summit, and Craig himself has been a great mentor and friend. So it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Craig to share his piece of the message for this special occasion.
Thank you, Harsha. Always good to see you, and tough to follow both Marshall and Frank, but I'll do my best. I'm going to just share a few slides here and build a little bit on the theme that Frank started with, which is really about celebrating 30 years of progress and the advancement of treatments and the availability of those treatments to patients on a more global basis. I think we have made good progress, and there's a lot of reason for optimism, as Frank alluded to. I think there's also potentially some things to watch out for, and those things will necessitate that we as a community work more closely together, collaborate, and advocate for the kinds of advancements in both policy and practice that will enable the momentum that we've generated around rare disease innovation to continue. For those who aren't familiar with Global Genes, we really represent the entire rare disease community globally. Our focus is really as an enablement organization, perhaps more than an advocacy organization. Our goal is to really help everyone from individual caregivers and patients through to communities of patients to stand up, to take the right next steps forward, to ultimately become more effective on their own in driving progress in their disease areas and across rare disease. And we do that in a variety of ways, ultimately with the goal of influencing what both Marshall and Frank have talked about, improving the diagnostic odyssey and ultimately accelerating progress so that we get access to treatments and cures. Our impact model, I won't spend a lot of time on, other than just to say, there are a variety of ways that we try and equip the community, and that is through both events and content, like Harsha spoke to, but also through increasingly services and tools, creating platforms that patients and communities can use to drive progress in rare disease research and drug development, and forming partnerships and initiating programs designed specifically to address some of the gaps and needs across the rare disease community. We've also, in this increasingly virtual world, launched a rare community portal, which is really designed as a way for patients and organizations and other stakeholders in rare disease, frankly, to be able to connect on an ongoing basis between events and touch points, and to share information and data and insights on topics that are really important to them, and maybe to connect to somebody that can make a meaningful difference in how they can move forward in their rare disease journey. I think we've seen some of this data before, the burden of rare disease data that Frank referenced. But I think what often doesn't get talked about is when you step back, and I think there's still a lot that we don't know about the burdens of rare disease. Arguably, it's the largest disease area of unmet need globally. If you think about 400 million, probably many more patients that are affected by rare disease, and you think about COVID, which has affected about that many people, there is no massive global response right now for rare disease. And that's something that we need to really continue to push for. I think also, as Marshall referenced, the number of diseases continues to increase. And yet the available treatments aren't increasing at nearly the same pace. We just issued a next report a couple of weeks ago that referenced work that RareX has done around identifying the number of diseases, and they come up with a number north of 10,000. And so that's likely to grow, and as it grows, the needs will grow. We've also heard a bit about the diagnostic challenges. We launched an initiative this past year called the Patient Identification, Inclusion, and Engagement for Rare CNS Disorders Initiative, or PI for CNS. And we did that, but we focused in CNS initially because by some estimates, almost half of rare conditions are neurological, and in childhood diseases in particular, by some estimates, as many as 90% have a neurological component to them. So we felt like looking there first, we'd probably gain some lessons that could be applied more broadly, but importantly could have an impact in a big area of need. And we looked at things like, what were some of the challenges that patients experienced in trying to get to a diagnosis. And these are small screens, but I can share that some of the primary ones that patients referenced were things like they didn't know what to look for necessarily in identifying signs and symptoms of a condition, or they may have been challenged to describe those things to a clinician in a way that was meaningful in getting to a diagnosis. It may have been in some instances they had difficulty getting access to the right type of testing. But interestingly enough, it was often on the clinician side where they talked about the challenges of a lack of access and coverage of testing and sequencing that might have enabled them to get information or data that would lead to a diagnosis. And if you start to think about these things in more global terms, these were predominantly respondents that were US, European, Australian, other markets. These challenges are likely even more exacerbated in many markets around the world, including India. So, thinking through how on a global basis we can do a better job of providing access to both the expertise about disease, developing more consistent understanding and descriptions of symptoms. Many times it's the caregiver that has the responsibility of chronicling those things and reporting it to clinicians. So we have to equip them better to make those descriptions meaningful. And then looking at different types of screening and other things that aren't as universally available as perhaps they need to be. I do share a lot of Frank's optimism about the way the world is headed. Rare disease has really become an important proving ground for some of the most promising advancements that we're seeing in biotechnology, and that includes gene therapy, gene editing, and things like that, which have started to take hold. You see here the data from the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, citing more than 2,600 trials around the world in regenerative medicine. Now, not all of those are in rare diseases, but a good percentage of them are in rare diseases and rare cancers. And that provides reason for optimism for us as we move forward. And a good number of them are in late stage development. I think another reason for optimism is the changing role that patients are now able to play much further upstream in the drug discovery and development process. Frank spoke to the discussion some years ago about listening to the growing voice of the patient. And that voice is now able to be expressed in some very different ways. One is through video and storytelling and capturing the experiences of patients much differently. The other arguably is data, and our ability now to capture data, to share data in more meaningful ways that can help contextualize what's going on with a patient and with a community of patients. And that might lead us to discoveries or better understanding of a disease, or ideally better diagnosis and access to treatment. We talked a little bit about the need for patients to describe what's meaningful to them as an outcome in a condition area. And I know that a number of organizations, including the Child Neurology Foundation, have been working actively on trying to develop clinically meaningful endpoints for trials and things that will help to assure that those condition areas where there are drug development programs in an expedited pathway are more likely to lead to a positive outcome and access to a treatment, because they're focusing on the right endpoints as to what represents a positive impact from that treatment. I think also, as Frank alluded to with the Every Life Foundation and some of the other work that's being done out there, we're starting to listen more to patients also about the burden of those conditions. And that's helping us to understand that the actual cost and impact on not just patients, but families far outweighs oftentimes the impact or cost of a treatment. And that will help, I think, in making sure that decisions that are made about access and coverage are informed by the right data and information. We're also seeing some interesting and I think exciting developments in terms of patients and advocacy organizations becoming entrepreneurial, sometimes out of necessity because their disease area is so small and they can't initially get interest from a drug developer or a researcher to look at their disease area. So they're going out and they're raising funds and they're developing mouse models and they're advancing a treatment to a point where they can get some of that interest. And we're starting to see more pathways emerging for them to do so. And I think as we look at what's going on more broadly in biotech markets today, there's probably going to be a little bit less investment and support for early stage assets, which means that we're going to need to do more as a community to help those patients and entrepreneurs to advance their programs and to make the right decisions and to help inform and mentor them as they go, so that we can get more of these treatments to patients. And lastly, I think one of the things that's changed is the nature of the relationship between patient communities and drug developers and in some instances health systems, in that as we look at gene therapy and some of these one-time transformative treatments, there will be an obligation not only to have the relationship with the patient community through trials and into treatment, but also to track the long-term durability of the impact of that treatment, potentially over decades, which means now that relationship between a treatment and a community may last several decades. And so that forces a reevaluation of how do we engage communities, and it really puts the community as in a position of leadership in those kinds of relationships moving forward. As I mentioned, though, there are some headwinds both in the market and in the sort of policy environment out there, and we're seeing even in developed markets like in Europe, some stepping back from some of the promising platforms and advanced therapies that could make so much of a difference for patients. And I think it's really important for us as a community to really rally and work with policymakers, payers, and industry to help ensure that the markets where these medications are so badly needed are accessible, and that patients can have equitable access around the world as more and more of these treatments come online. And so as we step back and we think about the next 30 years and what the opportunities really are for us to continue to drive momentum and progress in rare disease, we think these 10 areas are ones that we can collaborate on and really continue to drive progress. One is just ensuring more access to genetic testing and whole genome exome sequencing globally, and improving the diagnostic and treatment resources that are available for clinicians and patients. And I think we're seeing more opportunities now if the data becomes accessible in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, to make more and better use of that data to drive better decisions and diagnostics around the globe. I think the opportunities, and Marshall and Frank both referenced this, for patients and patient communities to become more involved in data collection, and then ensuring that that data can be more accessible and shared with researchers and drug developers globally, so that we can level the playing field in terms of access and innovation on a global basis. As we do that, we have to consider where the policies in certain markets actually prevent data from crossing borders or from being as accessible as it needs to be to drive progress. So we have work to do there. I think that the trend towards engaging patient communities further upstream in research and drug development is really important. We want to see that continue. Here in the US, the FDA has advanced the idea of pilot programs that would allow for real world evidence and other patient reported information to support regulatory submissions and to inform trial design. And I think we really need to both encourage and expand those kinds of opportunities, both here and elsewhere. I think also, as Dr. Sommer alluded to, developing common data standards and enabling the research communities and centers of excellence to work together and really help inform progress is going to be really important. And then I think just looking at new models for how we can support drug development, maybe in some non-traditional ways. There's work being done around things like drug repurposing and contribution of IP from abandoned drugs that may have an impact in rare diseases, even if they're not as useful in some other condition areas. And so we need to be looking creatively at opportunities there. And then I think just providing a framework, a consistent framework to allow patient communities to sustainably gather information and data over long periods of time to track outcomes and to contribute those outcomes and that data back to the community to support a variety of needs. So those are some of the opportunities we see out there. We are encouraged and we are open to collaborating with others. IndoUSrare has been a real leader in that arena, and they've really made an effort, as you can tell by the types of people that they bring to the table, to ensure that we are looking at this with a global perspective.
Thank you so much, Craig. This is great. Thank you for outlining the 10 opportunities and organizing all these in some context. And we really look forward to Global Genes as more of the global collaboration builder. And we are really honored to be a part of that ecosystem and collaborate with you to engage the Indian stakeholders better. So thank you so much for making time on your busy schedule today and sharing some of the lessons as NORD and Global Genes are some of the oldest organizations in rare disease advocacy. And there is much that everyone can learn from the lessons that you all have shared here. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that, let's move on to our next speaker, Dr. Swasti Charan from the Indian Health Ministry. We are really honored to have Dr. Swasti Charan, who is the Additional Deputy Director General and also the Director of the Emergency Medical Relief in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Thank you so much, Dr. Swasti Charan, for making time from your busy schedule on this important occasion. We welcome you to share your message to the community today.
Thank you, Dr. Harsa, for inviting me to this event. I must admit, and I must say that I'm very new to rare diseases. I look after emergency medical relief and some of the non-communicable diseases and the risk factors like tobacco and oral health program in the ministry. But about June last year, I started looking after the program of the area of rare diseases. We do not have an actual program for rare diseases in the country, and I was starting to look for ways and means of implementing the deliverables which has been already listed out in the National Rare Disease Policy. So this was something very, very new, and I started looking for partners. And in few months' time, I started meeting people who are already very interested in this. We do have a central technical committee for rare diseases where we have got all the centers of excellence and the eminent pediatricians who are dealing with rare diseases in their hospitals. And we do interact with them very regularly. But the area of patient advocacy groups and the several support groups came little later on. But I'm glad that they did come to me. And when in the last few days, I have been interacting. This is my fourth session with in relation to the World Rare Disease Day, and I have been trying to listen to many of the speakers. What I find is, the intent for doing something for the rare disease patients is there with each one of us, and I still do not know why we have to call these patients suffering from to be suffering from orphan diseases and drugs as orphan drugs. I was telling yesterday also, I really don't like the term. Now, we are all here together to do something for the patients with rare diseases. So this, the intent is clear with the policymakers, the intent is clear with the clinicians, the intent is also clear with the support groups. And this we need to convey to the patients suffering from the rare disease. That's the first statement I want to say. And probably then I started thinking that probably we should have more transparency between the policymakers, more transparency between the patient support groups, and also the Office of Drug Controller General of India, where who deals with the import of drugs and the clinical trials, etc. That transparency, once it is there, then our struggle, our tries to provide something for the patients with rare diseases would be more transparent and also understandable, and we would be able to accept things as it is. Sometimes I find that in the ministry, we feel that we are trying to do so many things under the principles written down in the rare disease policy, which is drafted by many of the experts in the country. And I hit a roadblock. And at the same time, the patients support group comes to us saying that you have this provision under this rare disease policy. Why don't you have this similar provision for the other group of diseases, which has been left out? And I also meet many of the doctors, especially the dermatologists, telling me that the rare disease policy doesn't address many of the diseases that we deal every day. Then I tell them that the policy is a very short document. It's always a very short document. It's a broad guidelines, and we have to have operating operational guidelines, implementation strategies for what is being written there in the policy. That's how we take care of the deliverables which has been listed out in the policy. So today only, I had a visitor from some of the companies, and they said that we need to see the definition of the rare disease, that it is not addressing all the rare diseases in the country. I said, some diseases have been listed out. We have got 3 groups there, and if you read the policy, there is also a provision saying that if there is a case and the doctor suspects that he or she is going to be seems to be suffering from a rare disease, then the rare disease policy has a provision that the Central Technical Committee for the Rare Diseases will take up that case and talk to the treating physician and find out whether that particular disease, a patient will fall into the category of rare diseases. Then once we say that it's a rare disease, and then we try to see whether it's in group 1, group 2, or group 3, according to the Indian rare disease policy. So that was an example I'm giving, that it's there in the policy. We have to find out ways and means of getting it done together. So very frankly, I'm trying to learn many things from the learned members here, and I have listened to some of the speakers in today's webinar. My request to all the seminars that I had been part of it was to please provide me a summary so that I can look at with the lens of the ministry from the rare disease policy point of view, and then try to find out how we can address some of those burning issues. The webinar, the discussions that we have here will only be meaningful, and we will be able to translate into reducing the suffering of the children or adults who are suffering from rare diseases, and also alleviate the harm or the suffering which the family is going through, and probably save more lives who could be otherwise, we could be losing them because of our inaction. So I need to see the summary. I need to look at them, what best we can provide, and if not, try to find out some novel ways of doing it. So that transparency, that intent, the clear intent of wanting to do something for the rare diseases, I extend from the ministry. We are all governed with guidelines and with the policies and laid down principles. We cannot sometimes do away with each one of them, but we will tell you that these are the areas where we can do, these are the areas where we are bound by this principle that we cannot do, and sometimes we cannot relax everything for rare diseases, because that policy or that framework has been framed for many diseases in the country. So that kind of transparency I want to bring here, and with this I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and we would like to interact more with each one of you in the future with an open mind. Thank you, Dr. Harsa. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swasticharan, for your leadership and your vision. Your experience in the tobacco control and the oral care and other public health issues are very valuable, and that leadership will really benefit the rare disease community. We look forward to collaborating with you. We will be sure to share a summary of this event, but also internally, we have been deliberating on the feedback for the national policy for rare disease, which we would also appreciate an opportunity to share with you in a document and follow up with you. I'll be visiting New Delhi, and I will request an opportunity to meet you and share these and discuss further. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to more collaborations. Okay, that was very inspiring to hear from the Indian Health Ministry to see that there is a roadmap and vision and hope for patients with rare diseases in a new era. With that, let's move on to our next part of the program, which is the panel discussion. The National Policy for Rare Disease in India has designated 8 centers of excellence for rare diseases. And today, I'm really honored to welcome Dr. Madhulika Kabra to join me in co-moderating this session of speakers representing most of these centers of excellence for rare diseases. Welcome, Dr. Kabra. Next slide, please. We have speakers representing 6 of the centers of excellence today. Let's go to the next slide. And the panelists will be introducing themselves shortly. Dr. Madhulika Kabra, who will be the co-host and moderator of the panel session, is a professor at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi, and she is the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from Dr. I.C. Verma, as well as the Dr. I.C. Verma SIAMG Outstanding Scientist Award in 2017. And she has more than 250 scientific publications in index journals. And she's been such a committed scientist and an advocate, always available for patients. So I really appreciate, and I'm honored to welcome Dr. Kabra to this panel. So let's jump into the panel discussion. If you can, Dr. Kabra, please say a couple words.
Good evening, everyone. And I would like to thank Harsha and Nisha for involving me in this session, very interesting session, and very, very encouraging talks we heard since the beginning. So thank you very much. And we can begin the panel, Harsha. Thank you.
Let's stop sharing the screen so we can have all the panelists on the screen. So now I'd like to welcome our panelists, Dr. Ashwin Dalal, Seema Kapoor, Dr. Mamta Muranjan, Dr. Neerja Gupta, Dr. Gautam, and Dr. Supratim Datta. So I'm really looking forward to this exciting panel with experts from across India that have joined us today. Dr. Neerja Gupta as well. Yes. You know, a lot of the work happens after the policy has been announced, and so these centers of excellence have existed for a long time, even before the policy framework was put in place. And these medical geneticists experts who are with us today have been helping hundreds of patients over the years with rare and genetic diseases. So I'd like to welcome and kick off this panel discussion with asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves in their opening remarks. Starting with Dr. Ashwin Dalal.
Thank you, Dr. Harsha, and greetings from our COE. So I'm Ashwin Dalal, and we work together with another institute, that is the Nizam's Institute of Medical Sciences here in Hyderabad. So our COE basically is a combination of a research institute and a hospital together, where we see patients with various genetic disorders. Almost 35 to 40 patients attend our OPD every day at the Nizam's Institute of Medical Sciences, where I have 2 of my colleagues, Dr. Pradnya Ranganath and Dr. Shagun Agarwal, who help in seeing the patients, evaluating them clinically, as well as doing prenatal ultrasounds, fetal autopsy, and genetic counseling for the patients. And the laboratory analysis for various genetic disorders, including the cytogenetic, molecular, and the biochemical genetic testing, as well as the next generation sequencing kind of analysis, happens in our laboratory at the Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics. We also have a ongoing teaching program where we feel that there's a need for a larger number of trained physicians in our country, so that more and more patients with these genetic diseases benefit by establishment of more and more centers throughout the country. And we are happy that the new rare disease policy has shown some hope towards improved diagnostics, improved infrastructure at the various centers, and following hopefully in future therapies for some of these diseases where they are beyond the scope or the affordability of these patients would be possible. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Kapoor?
Yeah, good afternoon, rather good evening to all of you. And I'm actually a director professor of pediatrics at Maulana Azad Medical College. And I have a keen interest in rare disorders, specifically in the incidence of these rare disorders and the way we would define rare disorders. I think it's a great thing that we could get together and make an impact and decide for ourselves as to what is going to be our goal in the coming year with respect to rare diseases. And we're also glad that we can, as a good group, we can actually debate and discuss various diseases which should be included and what should be the paradigm of their inclusion. With that, Dr. Harsha, I thank you for a very good choice of topic and a good quorum to go ahead with this program.
Appreciate it, Dr. Kapoor, for making time. Dr. Guranjan?
Good morning and good evening. So I'm currently professor of pediatrics and in charge of the genetics division with, at KEM Hospital, Mumbai. So my institute is almost 97, 98 years old, and one of the first institutes in the country to have a genetic clinic. So at our institute, most of our referrals are for inborn errors of metabolism. And we've been treating many of these inborn errors of metabolism with the diet therapies, and lately, since the past 20 years, with enzyme replacement therapy also. And I'm very honored to be part of this very eminent panel and part of the Indo-US rare disease program. So my personal interests, apart from inborn errors of metabolism, are newborn screening, prenatal diagnosis, and skeletal dysplasias. So we have, it's a teaching institute affiliated with the DS Medical College and the university. So we get multiple postgraduate students, and this puts us in a good position to start creating awareness of rare diseases amongst our undergraduate and postgraduate students, so they are sensitized to this topic very early when they are in their career. So I thank you very much, Dr. Harsha and Nisha, and I'm looking forward to the deliberations subsequently.
Great. Thank you for that brief introductory remarks. Dr. Supratim Datta?
Good evening, Dr. Harsha and Nisha. I am Dr. Supratim Datta, Professor and Head, Department of Pediatric Medicine of Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research. It's in Kolkata. It's a government medical college. It caters to undergraduate, postgraduate, as well as the several postdoctoral courses. Although the pediatric medicine, we used to see the rare disease patient in a sporadic way. We have the some sort of genetic facility in our institute. But the Center of Excellence, this has been established not even this is only a few months old, not even a year old even. But we hope that in the coming days, we'll take the baton in a very organized way, so that the helpless children and the helpless patient with those rare diseases, they are actually benefited. And in today's evening, I'm enlightened with so many the topics, the interesting topics, and all those things from the from the US experts as well as from the Indian experts. So I hope that the message which I will get from this evening gathering, that will be helpful for our Center of Excellence. And I'm looking forward to a very optimistic and very prospective Center of Excellence that we are going to establish. So
Great.
thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Datta. Dr. Gautam Ganguly, please.
Good evening to all. I'm Dr. Gautam Ganguly, professor and head of the Department of Neurology, IPGMER, and Bangalore Institute of Neuroscience. We have a genetic lab, and also we have the neuromuscular clinic, pediatrics neurology clinic, and genetic clinic, for which from the very beginning we are very come across the rare diseases, especially the neuromuscular cases, and during our institution, we have the facilities to investigate and treat these patients free of cost. Most of the patient, and in this situation, I personally, as a neurologist, hope to keep our patient a productive life and with minimal disability. That is my motto at present. And hope in future the newer drugs that is coming out, that will be the definitive treatment, and future will speaks the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly. Dr. Neerja Gupta.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Neerja. I work as an additional professor in the Department of Pediatrics as a clinical geneticist. So it's an honor to be a part of this quorum. So as you all know, that Division of Genetics is one of the oldest division of the Department of Pediatrics at AIIMS, and it is one of the first of its kind in India since 1966. And it has been a pioneer in providing comprehensive genetic services. It was started by Dr. I.C. Verma and now led by Madhurika Madam. So this division has been designated as WHO Collaborating Center and has been it partners with Government of India on various programs. So the thirst activities from our center includes patient care, education, training, and research. And we are a comprehensive clinical genetics center that provides integrated clinical and lab genetic services to a wide referral population in India and surrounding countries. And we have standard of care that encompasses the diagnosis of patients with rare disease using the latest technologies like NGS, MLP, etc., and managing patients with the best available therapies which are available worldwide. So we collaborate with our other divisions like pediatric neurology and pediatric oncology for providing the recent advances which have been there in the area of rare diseases. And we have initiated hematopoietic stem cell transplantation for some of the rare disorders as well. Thank you all for involving me.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. So audience, you can type in your questions to our eminent speakers in the Q&A box, and we will take them towards the end of the panel discussion. So next, I would like to ask a series of questions, and I request each one of you to respond within 60 seconds, if you can, so we can go cover all the questions. So my first question, Dr. Seema Kapoor, to you is, all these centers of excellence existed institutionally for a long time. Some we heard almost 100 years old. So what changed with the recent national policy for rare diseases?
So I think the first and important thing that came into existence is collaboration with each other. We were all friends and we were working in the same sphere. And the most common important denominator was the years that have been spent in the field of medical genetics. in the form of patient treatment, teaching, education, and promotion of research. So yes, this is what we were doing, but to coherently go up and decide a policy and decide the common aims of the policy and the distribution is what happened once this rare disease policy came in place.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. Dr. Mamta Muranjan, a question for you is, what can patients expect for this year and the next 3 years? What is the plan for the Centers of Excellence? You are on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that question. So it's been almost a year since the policy was released by the government of India. And in the past 1 year, there have been several encouraging positive events. Most of us at all the 8 centers have been now on, down to the brass tracks to address the ground realities of implementing the policy at individual centers. So we are working on formulating guidelines to prioritize patients who should be treated, which diseases should be treated. And we are also now very encouraged by the response from the corporates and the public sector PSU companies. We understand that they are very excited and committed to contribute through their CSR initiatives to fund treatments. Many of the labs are expecting, the centers are expecting to receive funds to upgrade the laboratory services. So all this ultimately transfers to patients availing state-of-the-art diagnostic facilities and looking forward to receiving funds for their treatments. So with that, over to you, Dr. Harsha.
Thank you so much for that. That's very insightful. Dr. Neerja Gupta, a question for you. The many patients and patient advocacy organizations have joined us here today, and they ask us regularly on how can they be more active participants, how can they engage with the Centers of Excellence, whether it's individual patients or patient organizations, to utilize the COEs better and take advantage of the national policy. So what advice would you have for them?
So thank you, Dr. Harsha, for this question. So I feel that for a big country like India, we need many more COEs so that we can channelize the patient care in a good manner. So there is a need to strengthen our patient referral network, I feel, because once the patient is referred, there is a indefinite type of time interval that when the patient consults us till all the investigations are done to understand whether the child is eligible for a particular treatment or not. So there's quite a big time lag is lying there. So where the parent organization and NGOs probably can come forward for establishing a fast track kind of system so that the care can be expedited. And probably we should have flyers for various diseases so that whenever a patient is walking into the OPD, those flyers are to be made by a parent organization, which carries the names and the contact numbers of the patients who of the office bearers of that particular parent organization, so that the patient is first hand contact is made with the parent organization. Otherwise, these patients are lost, and the physicians are not able to make that contact between the organization and the patient. So we may be having so many patients, but these patients are not directed to the parent organization because of the lack of communication. So maybe those flyers can be kept in the OPDs to start with the COE centers, so that if a child is coming with primary immunodeficiency, patient is given that flyer, brief information, whom to contact, what are the resources, likewise lysosomal storage disorder, likewise many other disorders. I think this can be done, and it is easily doable.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful for the 29 patient alliance member organizations that ask about this regularly. So this is very helpful advice. So some sort of a patient concierge and a chaperone who can handhold the patients and walk them through journey and care coordination. That would be the next question, Dr. Supratim Datta, for you is learning from other low and middle income countries can also be useful. So what are your views on this? Are there any examples as to what we can learn from other low and middle income countries? You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Vatsa. The thing is that so various articles are there from our neighboring countries, and we can have some ideas from them also. And I'm citing few of them. The first thing is on the part of the governance, the definition of rare disease is to be made, and the most important thing is the adoption of the Orphan Drug Act, which is there in many countries, in the developed countries as well as in our neighboring countries. That is to be adopted. And as a part of the awareness program, the several patient support group or advocacy group and the media attention, their role is very, very important. And to increase the clinical expertise, clinical skill, the presence of Center of Excellence is very important. The only 8 centers are there. In the coming days, I think the more number of Center of Excellence will be helpful for a huge country like India. And the registry of the patient, that is another important thing which is to be taken into consideration. And not only that, the national guidelines is to be formulated. That is one important aspect in the care of the rare disease. Now, regarding the funding, the government funding for the treatment of rare disease, the government funding for the research in the rare disease, needless to mention about these 2 aspects. And needless to mention about the role of the non-government organization, non-government access to the rare disease treatment, the charitable trust, the industry funds, the philanthropies, so many things are there, the crowdfunding, so many points are there. And another important aspect is the newborn screening, the national policy, the universal national policy for newborn screening. That will be very important and important aspect or important step in controlling the rare disease also. That is another important step. So with this, hand over to Dr. Harsha. These are the few points I can put over here, what we can learn from our neighboring countries.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Ashwin Dalal, the question is, what should be the research directions for rare diseases in low and middle income countries like India from a research point of view?
Yeah, so everything begins with research, and then ultimately it comes into practice, whether it is diagnostics or therapy. So India also needs to encourage and increase research in development of affordable diagnostic methods. Many methods are available, but it starts right from there that the diagnostic methods itself are not affordable to many patients. So we need to have affordable diagnostic methods developed. Similarly, the therapeutic strategies or drug development has to be encouraged in the country itself. We rely on imported drugs, and that cost is high, and the full circle keeps continuing that because cost is high, then there is no funds for that. So we have seen in many situations where the manufacturing or the development happens within the country, then the cost is always much lower compared to something which is imported. So clinical trials need to be taken up more and more for new as well as repurposed drugs. That again is a very much lacking in our country. And lastly, basic research really needs to be strengthened, especially in the rare diseases, for identification of novel genes or their functional assays or disease modeling, which again is happening in very, very few laboratories in the country. So I think this research infrastructure needs to be really strengthened for the rare diseases, so that everything picks up. Good research leads to good drug development or something, and then the pharma comes into picture. So I think everything starts off from having some basic original research beginning in the country.
Yeah, we have, thank you so much, Dr. Dalal. We have so much of patients and burden in India itself, but at IndoUSrare, the patient concierge, we receive requests from patients from Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh recently, and a patient actually visited from Bangladesh to Delhi and so on. So is there a plan to handle foreign nationals coming for care into the centers of excellence? Anyone likes to take that question? Maybe Dr. Kabra.
Harsha, I don't think it is mentioned in the policy.
Yeah.
Though I think individual institutions do have rules about this. And the patients, like in our institute, we get patients from the neighboring countries, and there is some formality which is to be done. At times they need a letter from us to get visa, and so like particularly from Pakistan and other neighboring countries. So they need letters, and it is issued through the medical superintendent or the concerned, and they can come, and it is being done. But I don't, as of now, it has not been mentioned in the rare disease policy, but I'm sure through the same channels, these patients can also be taken care of.
That will be very helpful as patients with rare diseases are distributed geographically, and many of these suffering patients, they message on Facebook, literally pleading as to how we can help their child with a rare disease. So it's great that we have so much of expertise and available in India, and the centers of excellence can potentially help them. Dr. Kabra, this is probably a good segue for you to drive the next set of discussions.
Yeah. Thank you, Harsha. So some more questions to all my friends, and Ashwin, we'll just take you over the same question, similar question rather. So the policy states that cost-effective diagnostics is an important goal. And though we see that actually there has been real progress in the availability of diagnostics, even accessibility of diagnostics, but still the cost is high. So what do you think is the way forward? And primarily about cost-effective diagnostics, low-cost diagnostics. So what kind of work, research is actually required to do this? So Ashwin, please.
Yes, madam. So that is the first step to detect any rare disorder, that the correct diagnostics needs to be established, and many of these diagnostics become cheaper with the numbers. So I think more efforts we need to put towards development of these diagnostics, where we try and pool samples through a network of centers. Because what happens in many of these techniques, like the next generation sequencing based analysis, that when you pool the samples, multiple samples at a time, that becomes much cheaper compared to doing individual samples. So if we need to come up with affordable diagnostics, then we really need to have this kind of networks where we pool the samples from multiple different centers together and then run this kind of assays. Secondly, we need to really plan based on the common diseases, that we are able to develop diagnostics for these common diseases for their prevention, like either it is the screening for common diseases. And this is where I think the major program launched by the Department of Biotechnology, that is the DBT Umeed program, which is also mentioned in the rare disease policy, is really a flagship program of Department of Biotechnology, where they are envisaging to establish these centers called as Nidan Kendras, as well as aspirational district centers throughout the country. Already about 7 are established, and almost 30 are in pipeline, and hopefully in the next few years we are looking at developing these centers at almost every district hospital, where some sort of a genetic testing, a very basic affordable screening based genetic testing would be available. And that would take us a long way in making these diagnostics reach to the lowest strata of the society. So I think we need to work towards working towards developing affordable diagnostics for the common diseases and then the apex centers can always deal with the more rarer diseases.
Yeah, thank you, Ashwin. So very good points. I think that boils down to networking, as we have been discussing about that. We need to have facilities available in the periphery also, not in the bigger cities, and so that all patients have access, and that's how we can bring down the cost. So thank you, Ashwin. So next question is for you, Neerja. So we have been since we have started working on the rare disease policy. The main concern of everybody, clinicians and the patients, is that how to give treatment. So accessibility of treatment, availability of treatment is a big problem. So, and the cost is high. So, sir, what can we do in this area to develop these drugs in the country? And do you think there are some very low-hanging fruits which can be dealt with immediately before we sort of venture into other things like gene therapy and enzyme replacement and things like that? So your views on this, Neerja? Neerja, you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you, ma'am. So this is indeed a very important question. We need to move towards affordable treatment also, cost-effective treatment also, after having cost-effective diagnosis. So it is important to understand that there are several levels of treatment, as you rightly said, replacing or modifying the genes, replacing or modifying the protein, or simply modifying the diets or providing dietary supplements. So I feel that this simple modification of diets and providing dietary supplement is a part of the low-hanging fruits. And then there are a few companies which have in India which have started manufacturing these diets for inborn error of metabolism. So that is why the cost has reduced for most small molecule disorders. And moreover, there are a few medicines for rare disorders for which active pharmacological ingredient is available in India. So it is just required to bring the pharmaceutical companies to make use of this active pharmacological ingredient and to convert it into medicines, because it is presently being exported. So, and we are now there, the molecule is exported, ingredients are exported, and then they are processed outside, and then they are brought in at an exorbitant cost, which is not affordable. So I think if pharma companies join hand and then they start manufacturing it in India, then it is possible. So we have a list of very many active ingredients which are available in India. So I feel that these are the low-hanging fruits. And if we start working on made in India model for rare disease medicines, then definitely it is going to benefit masses.
Yes, so definitely very good points, Neerja. And if we have manufactured drugs within the country which have helped all over the world, in fact. So if we have cheaper drugs here, then maybe other patients, other than India, patients will be benefited even all over the world. So thank you, Neerja. Yeah, repurposing, yes. Yeah, definitely. That is again very, very doable. So Seema, next question is for you. So you are very passionate about newborn screening, right? So, and we have been talking about early diagnosis and screening. So in a country like ours, low middle income, so from, I think we have been saying low income and now we are low middle income country. So what do you think for rare disorders, are we really ready to have newborn screening in our country? And what, just your views about this, because everybody is talking about this now. Seema, you are muted.
So sorry for that. And I think the first challenge that we had was, what is the definition of rare disorders in India? So we had pockets and we had publications which were retrospective, that is patient-centered, coming to a tertiary care center. And we really did not have the right numerator, though we had the large denominator quoted by the number of populations in India. So I think the first thing that we should do is to combine our efforts to find out actually the burden of rare disorders, and that can be done only in a prospective manner. And one of the ways to do it is the way Taiwan has done it, is to do by newborn screening. So currently there are really very economical models to do newborn screening for rare disorders, some of which can even be done. I mean, a few in-house methods have also been developed in our country. For example, for severe combined immunodeficiency, X-linked A-gamma globulinemia, so that we can have, and hematopoietic stem cell transplantation is the therapy for them. So that can be the way forward for a country like India. And newborn screening definitely is one of the ways to find out the burden, and therefore an estimate of what is likely to be the cost can be made. So it's a doable exercise for some very low hanging fruits that we can immediately look into for treatment.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
yes, thank you, Seema, for this very important point. So if we generate data regarding rare diseases, maybe in the research mode as of now, and screen sort of large populations, and then because everybody asks us what is the magnitude, why should we bother about the rare diseases? So generating data and then thinking which is doable, and then the disorders which are to be screened, we all know hypothyroidism, CAH, and all, which should be there at least, if not all. Right, thank you. So Mamta, you are interested in lysosomal storage disorders. So now we have been again having problems, particularly for this group of disorders. We have several requests, and the funding is a major issue. So and then again there are ethical issues which are there, that why not all patients be funded? We had questions yesterday, something like this. So what are your views, and why do you think that there should be prioritization or some prerequisites for funding a patient? And obviously there are ethical dilemmas if you think of parent perspectives and if our own perspective when we see these patients. So your views on this? A little tricky and difficult question.
Yes, but it's a question which is foremost in all our minds, the healthcare personnel as well as the patients. Will my child get treatment? Now, we are in a situation in India where there are many beneficiaries but limited resources. So in such a situation, one has to prioritize. The prioritization would be selecting diseases where there is a robust data that a particular treatment is beneficial. And this has been documented in clinical trials and a number of patients who've been receiving therapy. Secondly, one would also look at prioritizing drugs with well documented cost benefit ratios. So this would justify commencing a therapy. And we also want to know the safety and efficacy profile of the drug. And the third thing would be to prioritize amongst our individual patients, who is the one most likely to benefit for a treatment. And for this reason, one requires objective guidelines, objective criteria. So it would be an unbiased selection when we decide one particular patient requires treatment over the other. And unfortunately, what Dr. Madhulika said is, in this situation where the demand is much more than the supply, it leads to some very heartbreaking situations when we, as physicians, we want to treat everyone. Every patient wants treatment for every family wants treatment for their own child. But unfortunately, the supply is far lesser than the demand. So it is very heartbreaking then to convey to the family that somebody is getting treatment, but sorry, not your child. It's a very, very difficult situation to be in. And the second thing which really causes a lot of heartburn is when you have to take the tough decision of discontinuing or withholding therapy from a couple of patients. So these are some difficult challenges that we have been facing in the past couple of years as we go along treating these rare disorders.
Thank you, Mamta. So, there are no clear solutions to this. There are some gray areas, but obviously it is required to have some pre-decided criteria. So thank you, Mamta. So now moving on to Dr. Datta. So your center has developed very good support services and the children who are developmentally delayed and the patients who require stimulation, physiotherapy, and you have an excellent center there. So what do you think is the role of these support services in the management of rare diseases? Because very few of them have got treatment, and our patients are just running after specific therapy if it is available, and they forget about the support services and the importance of that. So your views on this, sir?
Thank you, Kabra Madam. This is a very often misconception, not only on the part of the patients as well as for the medical fraternity also, that for example, enzyme replacement therapy for the lysosomal storage disorder, that is the ultimate answer and the only answer, and nothing is to be done. So that is why the support service, which is very, very important. The thing is that, for example, in any SMA patient, if the disease modifying drug is given, the physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and all those things are very, very important. Not only the role of the physical medicine department, there is a role of the cardiology department, there is a role of respiratory medicine department, there is a role of neurology department, and basically this is a multidisciplinary approach, and the help of each and every department is needed in a tertiary care hospital. So this is to be stressed upon while giving a treatment to a rare disease, that only the specific therapy or the disease modifying therapy, that is not the only answer. The help of the other departments are very, very important. Rather their 50-50% role they do have in equal share. That means the disease modifying therapy as well as the support services. So our hospital, being the tertiary care hospital, we have all these support services. We have a very good PMR department. We have a very good cardiology, neurology, the respiratory medicine, the postdoctoral, several postdoctoral courses are there. So we hope that with all these support services, we'll be able to give the justice to the children, not only with the disease modifying drug, if it is available in near future. All the support services are available in our hospital. That is not only applicable for our hospital, that is applicable for all centers of excellence, all the centers where the rare diseases are.
Definitely.
So,
thank you very
Kabra
much. So,
Madam.
yeah. So for this, I mean, the bottom line is a multidisciplinary approach and emphasizing to the parents that it is not only specific therapy, but the support therapies are in fact more important in certain situations. So the last question is to Dr. Ganguly, because you are a neurologist. I mean, the parents have sometimes very unrealistic hopes. So can you comment on the realistic expectations of the patients, for the patients who are being treated for neurological disorders and primarily neuromuscular, because we have been getting so many requests for treatment for DMD, SMA. So what would be your approach and how would you sort of counsel and explain these parents? What are your views about this, sir?
Thank you, madam. On the neuromuscular point of that, because we have a genetic, I have mentioned already, we have a genetic clinic, neuromuscular clinic, and the pediatrics neurology clinic. We have got many cases, and now what we say that first of all, the proper clinical history and also the clinical examinations, proper observations, not only that will give us the clue that is these are the things patients that maybe they incorporated within the neurological the rare diseases. Now the neuromuscular diseases, except this acquired immunological causes, the rare genetic causes or these congenital diseases, they are very much, we have to chalk out the plan of treatment, like the definitive treatment, symptomatic treatment, supportive treatment with neurorehabilitations, and maintain the proper quality, try to maintain the proper quality of life. In this case, that already Dr. Supratim has mentioned that we have a rare disease OPD once a week on Wednesday, where we all, the pediatrics, neonatologists, the PMR department, cardiology, the chest department, we all sit together to prevent the harassment of the patient. Though we are examining the patient and refer to PMR, they will rush to the PMR OPD, then in a queue, then going to the chest. It's very difficult. So we have planned to we examine the patient within a room, big room. All the facility, departmental experts are there, and we will do the investigations, and then we start the treatment. Question is the definitive treatment. In the definitive treatment, like gene therapy, then enzyme replacement therapy, then exon skipping therapy, these are the available in the neuromuscular disease, of which enzyme replacement therapy is in Pompe's and in the Gaucher's disease. They're very much responsive, except in Gaucher's, those are neurologically symptoms that is not correctable with this enzyme therapy. So these are the very costly therapy, and it is not possible for a person's family to supply all the medicine, to provide all the medicine for his or her child. This is the pathetic scenarios. So along with the government, crowdfunding and the small donations from the large population, it should be arranged. That is under a leadership. Obviously, I hope this government will take this leadership, and that should be maintained, persistent collections of the money, and there will be certain inclusion and exclusion criteria. We know that is all the rare diseases, even the neuromuscular diseases, all are not responsive to therapy. There is a certain criteria, inclusion criteria, and we have to follow the inclusion criteria. That will be a better thing. Otherwise, it is a very difficult if we include all the cases who are bedridden, and not only wheelchair but bedridden, cannot able to sit, then we give this in SMA patient, we give the Ristinum. I think this is not benefited. We have to counseling the parents, the guardian, their caregivers, and it needs complete awareness. And this awareness, it is not the medical fraternity. They will aware the people, they will aware, but each and every government media should take active role in this rare diseases, the active role to this awareness, to whom we will give the treatment, where they will get the treatment, and how will we, and they should cooperate with the doctor, because it is we neurologists hope to give our patient a productive life and with minimal disability, while keeping in the mind, we shall keep in the mind that there is a limitation is there sometime. So I hope this, and in future, obviously, with this genetics therapies come, that will keep the cost will be calmed down in future, because more and more patient will be included. And as a rule, whenever there will be, as the genetic testing also, that has been to mention, though there will be many people, then genetic testing will be less costly. So if more and more people will be incorporated, more and more people will be incorporated, and if the cost will be much less, then there will be great hope. And I think in future, we will not only see the smile of the parents of the baby, we will also be very satisfied to treat this rare disease patient. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir. So having all facilities under one roof is a very good idea, and we are all thriving for that. And then there should be realistic expectations of the patients, definitely. So Harsha, before we conclude, in fact, I have two questions for you, and you can maybe summarize with that the panel. So two questions. One is that we are all talking about the crowdfunding. So is there any experience from other countries where the funding has been done through crowdfunding, and what are the successes or failures? And the second thing is that how do you think that IndoUSrare can support this rare disease initiative in India? So your concluding remarks on this. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Kabra. This was a fantastic panel, and it was great, insightful to learn from all the centers of excellence. In terms of concluding remarks, India, I think, is probably the first country that I am aware of that included crowdfunding as part of the national policy, which is fascinating, acknowledging the availability of such a mechanism to raise funds. But at the same time, it's very hard to expect philanthropy at that scale that's necessary even to fund individual patient treatments. In the United States, many individual patients and families do run fundraising campaigns on their own, supported by certain patient organizations and NGOs, but it's not part of the policy, to my knowledge. But it is fairly successful in the US and other countries where there is tax exemption for donation, it's well organized, and there are both institutional donors, individual donors, and large endowment funds and other mechanisms and grants available. So it's a little bit easier, but still a very difficult process to go through the crowdfunding, especially if it has to be done, initiated by the families who may not have the necessary digital savviness, know-how, network, connections to high net worth individuals who could donate, etc. So organizations like IndoUSrare could try and facilitate, but it's still a massive task in terms of bringing such kind of financials. So I think where we see the opportunity as IndoUSrare is to really help make connections. You know, when patients contact us through our tech-enabled patient concierge, we can refer them to the expertise that's here on this panel and across India, all the centers of excellence. I learned through the course of interactions with Dr. Kabra that there is no territorial restrictions. Any patient can go to any center of excellence, and all centers of excellence have amazing expertise and medical facilities. So that's something very humbling to know and be able to say, you know, please go here, you may find help. And so that's what we look forward to doing. And we will also be working closely with our member organizations on the ground in India, the NGOs, who could be the chaperones and provide the patient support on the ground. And other organizations are also doing that in India. Those are some areas. The other key gap we see is clinical trials and research, which also one of the audience member has asked a question, is amazing diagnostic facilities and care coordination in India, but clinical trials and new therapy development might be an opportunity for 90% of rare diseases and patients where there is no yet approved treatments. And you know, majority of the trials happen in US and Europe, and making such connections and bringing or encouraging clinical trial sites to be set up in India, or making a way for patients in India to travel, like Frank was suggesting, for gene therapy and one-and-done treatments. Patients can come and get treatment, but they will need the support of medical doctors who have been phenomenal in India. In really, the volume of patients that Indian doctors handle is second to none in the world that I'm aware of. So kudos to all of you, and appreciate making time on this important occasion to share your insights. We look forward to collaborating with all of you moving forward.
Thank you very much.
With that, we will conclude the panel discussion. Please join me in thanking every speaker on this panel. And we will move on to the next part of this session. I now welcome Dr. Reena Karta, who is the board director at IndoUS organization for rare diseases, and she's also the associate professor at University of Minnesota, and he leads the Center of Orphan Drug Research there. Welcome, Reena, take it away. I encourage everyone to stay back for the wonderful art that's going to follow, as well after the patient talk. You know, no Rare Disease Day celebration is complete without hearing firsthand from a patient who has suffered and benefited from orphan treatment on this important occasion of the 30-year celebration. So I'll let Reena lead that next session. Thank you.
Thanks, Harsha. I agree that this had been a very engaging discussion, and I learned a lot from the keynote speaker, from our key opinion leaders and the panelists. And as you were mentioning, I mean, before we go into the next session where we can hear from our patients who will share their journey living with a rare disease, I just wanted to do a quick plug-in about our upcoming quarterly webinar, which is happening next in a couple of weeks. So we have Dr. Radha Ramadevi, who will be discussing further about newborn screening. So we heard from our panelists about how important it is to have early diagnosis, which is very important for a better outlook for patients, because identifying these babies early on will help us intervene early. And now we have so much of a different affordable technology that is coming up, so that hopefully this will become a standard of care, that all babies that are born in India will have the opportunity to be screened at that point. And whatever their mutation is, whatever their the problem is, could be identified early, and we could intervene with more affordable therapies. So with that, let's welcome our next speaker. And it's my pleasure, my privilege to introduce my good friend, Ms. Cynthia Frank, who is joining us from California here to share her story. Cindy, thank you so much for staying for participating in our event and for staying for the full event. She is a patient advocate and a longstanding member of several Gaucher and rare disease communities. And over a span of last 40 years, she has participated in several clinical trials and research studies, and has offered her perspective as a patient. We kept hearing from all of the speakers about the patient voice, and she had been there always trying to give her voice, to give her perspective by serving on boards and committees for several organizations, be it the National Institute of Health Lysosome Disease Network Advisory Council, the National Gaucher Foundation Advisory Group, the Global Genes Corporate Alliance Committee, and also as advisor for pharma companies. So without much ado, let me hand the platform to Cindy. Thanks, Cindy. Take it from here.
Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can share my, there it is, share my slide deck. So thank you so much, everyone, for having me today. As Dr. Kartha said, I am a Gaucher disease patient. I have type 1 Gaucher disease, and I also have been very involved over many years as a patient advocate in both the Gaucher and rare disease communities. Currently, I am co-founder and co-president of a fairly new Gaucher patient organization in North America. We cover both Canada and the US. We're called the Gaucher Community Alliance. Before that, I worked for about 11 years for the National Gaucher Foundation. As Dr. Kartha said, I've been in many drug trials and research trials over the years. And I've spoken for a lot of different drug companies, served on their committees, and really just try to be as involved as I can, because I think the patient as well, being a rare disease, it's so important that we're involved as well in really trying to make change and bring treatments to market for this disease. So I'm just sharing a photograph of my family, obviously back in the 1960s. And I am the one, I think you see I'm to the left. I'm the really pale one that looks like I'm being choked. So we had kind of a normal family and lived in East End of Long Island, New York. And my mother was a beautiful model and my father made clothing for the fashion industry. And I was just a sickly child. And there was really no excuse for it. So when you talk about how long did it take to be diagnosed, it either could have taken 1 year or it could have taken 13 years, depending how you look at this. So I was symptomatic starting really as an infant at 6 months old. I had gotten a very high fever of over I'll have to say it in Fahrenheit, but 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, very incredibly high. I had bone pain my whole life, which was overlooked as growing pains. I bled all the time and I bruised all the time. And that's because I had a New York brother that beat me up. I had a big belly and there was really no explanation for that. But I eventually had brown spots in my skin and my skin turned yellow because of liver disease. But I think really the two things that were the worst are my fatigue. I slept all the time. I couldn't get out of bed till 1, 2 in the afternoon. And I was called lazy my whole life. And I had a very weak immune system. So if someone had a cold, I was guaranteed to get it. And that cold would last sometimes weeks, if not months. And I want to say earlier, I just described what I call the physical symptoms of Gaucher, but they're also what I believe are emotional symptoms. And those emotional symptoms took over my life. And I was depressed for many, many years. And when I was diagnosed, I quickly went into denial and I didn't even acknowledge my disease. And I was angry and I felt ashamed, and the depression I had for years and years. And then of course, the hopelessness. I was diagnosed, what first happened, I was 12 years old and I had a big bruise on my calf. And my mother took me to our pediatrician, and she, of course, was panicked by this enormous bruise. And the doctor said that I was malnourished. He misdiagnosed me as malnutrition because I was thin and had a big belly. And he told my mother to go home and feed me meat. I didn't like to eat a lot. So she fed me a lot of liver because it was the only thing I would eat. And a month later, not only did the bruise not go away, but it got worse and it spread up my leg. My mother took me back to the pediatrician and they took blood and they definitely saw something was off. They saw some high white counts and some very, very low red counts. And I was sent to a hematologist and misdiagnosed again with leukemia. And this doctor was actually on sabbatical from India. Her name was Dr. Kurmboy. I don't remember her first name, and she saved my life. And she brought me back to the doctor for a year, 2 to 3 times a week, and took blood and took blood and took blood and researched. And this was in the middle of the 1970s. When something like Gaucher disease and most rare diseases, we didn't have the awareness that we have today on a lot of these diseases. And she learned of this rare genetic disease, Gaucher disease. The thing is, though, I'm only half Jewish, so they weren't quite sure if this could be the disease. And eventually they took bone marrow from my spine and I was diagnosed with Gaucher. So good news, it's not leukemia. Bad news, it's a rare genetic disease. And back then there was no treatment. So Dr. Kurmboy very quickly learned of Dr. Roscoe Brady at the National Institutes of Health. And I ended up going there every 6 months for 1 to 2 weeks and started in a research program. And Dr. Brady really became the hope in our family. He talked about the research he was doing. He talked about the possibilities that might happen someday down the road. He was really a light in our family, and eventually it worked. I joined his initial trial in the late 80s, which was the original Saradase trial. And the drug worked on me and everything changed. And I went from having this enormous spleen and not being able to get out of bed. And I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs for many, many years. I was too sick and I had too much fatigue. And as soon as I stood up, I bled and I'd have to get blood transfusions. So the disease was very, very severe in me. I have a type 1 gene and I also have a type 2/3 gene, which gives me, generally speaking, more severe type 1 disease. And this drug came along and it changed my life. And I realized I could have a long life and I could start thinking long term, and I never allowed myself to do that before. So for about 23 years, I was on enzyme replacement therapy. And then of course I joined another drug trial and I was in the substrate reduction trial. And I've been on that drug for about 11 years now. And treatment has changed my life. It's changed everything. And I think, I'm so thankful for research because it gave me life. It gave me another chance. But what's interesting is as soon as this happened, the focus didn't become on staying alive and it didn't become on trying to feel well. The focus now, it was on how am I going to get insurance? And that's one of the issues in the US is that we get our medication either through private insurance, unless you are poor, and then you can go on to a Medi-Cal or a Medicaid program. And then at 65, you go on Medicare. The only way I could get insurance was if I had a job. And the only way I could get a job is if I felt well enough to work. So it was a little bit of a vicious cycle. I couldn't get my treatment unless I could work. I couldn't work unless I felt well. And I didn't get insurance unless I had a full-time job. You can't get the insurance with a part-time job. So the focus changed in my life. And I really started to try to figure out, how am I going to manage this disease throughout my life? How am I going to manage this with my relationships? can I get married now? Can I have a partner? Can I raise a family? None of that was a possibility when I was diagnosed at 13, because I was told I would be using a wheelchair by the time I was 20, and I probably wouldn't live past 30. So the gratitude for all the work that all of you have done is beyond for me. And what I was able to do through treatment, and once I got healthier, is to give back. And how do we give back? How do you give back when you're a patient? You can do drug trials. You can rally support from other patients. You can volunteer your time. And so I decided to go work with the National Gaucher Foundation. And it was actually Dr. Brady, my original doctor, who really put me in that direction and put me in touch with the executive director. And so I realized I'm not my disease, but it is everything for me. It dictates what I do in life from the second I wake up, and the supplements I take and the medication I take until I go to sleep, and usually exhausted, collapsing in bed, because unfortunately treatment has not solved everything for me. I do still have a lot of bone pain. I even had a couple of bone crises while on treatment, and I do work too much. And part of that driving force is to give back to this disease, and thus starting a patient organization. But I realized that there is a way to balance everything, especially with treatment, and being able to have treatment. I'm privileged at being part of the rare disease patient community, and it's given me this treatment and really learning how through therapy to get over the depression and get over some of those crippling emotional effects that a rare disease can give you. And I stopped denying, and I started accepting my disease. And when I started accepting it, I started embracing it and realizing that this does not have to hinder me. I can take charge of my disease. You can't always take control, but you can take charge. And I realized I'm not a victim anymore, and I am a victor. And having victory in your disease, that's what gives you the empowerment to give back. That's what gives you the empowerment to hopefully not that others won't go through the same thing. And so we are so fortunate in this country to have access to many different treatments. Treatment has changed my life, but it's also, I think, a lot of the personal work that many people have to do with their own emotions in trying to get past having a genetic disease. And I share this photo because there was most of my life in my 20s, I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, and I had so much pain and weakness, I couldn't do anything. And now I can go to Yosemite and climb mountains. And that's a personal story on how the tides have really, really changed through the work that all of you are doing. And I just can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Cindy. And hopefully you will also make a trip to India sometime.
Absolutely. And I don't know if everyone can see my Indian earrings are on, but they were a gift from my neighbor who's from India.
Okay, now that's gorgeous. Thank you. And every time I hear your story, I always admire your tenacity, and I'm always impressed by your optimism. It's so contagious. And I'm sure there are a lot of patients who are attending our session today who would be feeling the same way, and who would be reaching out to you through us probably to get your story or get some tips from you. So next we want to share a video from that tells another story from a patient who is in India whose life changed because of timely diagnosis and treatment. Can somebody share the video? Start the video, please.
मेरा नाम अलका सिंह है। मेरा जन्म 1987 में हुआ था। मैं तेलीबाग लखनऊ में रहती हूँ। मुझे गॉसर डिजीज है और मेरे घर में बाकी सब लोग ठीक हैं, बस ये बीमारी मुझे ही है। जब मैं स्कूल में थी तो मुझे खेलना भी पसंद था, जैसे सब बच्चों को पसंद होता है, और मुझे कुकिंग का भी शौक था। मैंने स्टिचिंग भी सीखी, सॉफ्ट टॉयज बनाना सीखा। जब मेरी 2015 में शादी हो गई, उसके बाद फिर बच्चे, फैमिली, तो इस टाइम तो मैं बच्चों में ही बिजी रहती हूँ। 2 बच्चे मेरा आगे का प्लान है कि मुझे शॉप ओपन करनी है, लेकिन अभी थोड़ा टाइम लगेगा उसमें। बचपन से ही मैं मेरा इलाज चलता था, कुछ ना कुछ वो बीमारी होती थी। एक बार ऐसे बीमार हुई तो 2009 में पीजीआई में मुझे गैस्ट्रो डिपार्टमेंट में दिखाया गया। तो वहाँ पे जब मेरा टेस्ट हुए और बोन मैरो जांच हुई तो उसमें मुझे मेरी मतलब बीमारी का पता चला। 2009 में गैस्ट्रो डिपार्टमेंट से जेनेटिक डिपार्टमेंट में रेफर किया गया। जैसे मेरा ट्रीटमेंट स्टार्ट हुआ है, मुझे पहले जैसी कोई भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। मतलब कोई मुझे देख के बता नहीं सकता है कि मुझे ऐसी कुछ रेयर डिजीज भी है। यहाँ तक कि अब मैं सेमिनार वगैरह भी अटेंड करती हूँ तो वहाँ लोग मुझसे बोलते हैं कि आपके साथ में पेशेंट कौन है। तो जब मैं बोलती हूँ कि मैं ही पेशेंट हूँ तो लोगों को बिलीव नहीं होता है। मुझे खुद अंदर से मतलब अच्छा लगता है कि एक टाइम पे था कि मैं हमेशा बीमार रहती थी, लेकिन प्रॉपर ट्रीटमेंट मिलने की वजह से, अच्छा ट्रीटमेंट मिलने की वजह से और डॉक्टरों का अच्छा गाइडेंस होने की वजह से उन्होंने मुझे अच्छे से गाइड किया, तो आज मैं बेटर लाइफ जी रही हूँ। मेरे बच्चे भी हेल्दी हैं, नॉर्मल हैं, मेरे हस्बैंड बहुत सपोर्टिव हैं और अब मैं अपने हस्बैंड और दोनों बच्चों के साथ रहती हूँ और मेरी एक हैप्पी फैमिली है।
मेरा नाम नीरज सिंह है। मैं लगभग 30 सालों से लखनऊ में ही रह रहा हूँ और अभी मैं फिलहाल जो है सिंचाई विभाग में सीनियर असिस्टेंट की पोस्ट पे काम कर रहा हूँ और एकदम नॉर्मल लाइफ चल रही, कहीं कोई दिक्कत नहीं। अब तो पीजीआई जाते हैं, हर 3 महीने पे दवा मिल जाती है। एक बार जाना होता है मुश्किल से आधे घंटे के लिए, जाके वो दवा ले आते हैं, 3 महीने अपना घर पे खाती रहती है। कहीं कोई दिक्कत नहीं, कहीं कुछ भी नहीं। उल्टा मैंने तो और चीज़ें देखी हैं कि शादी के बाद जब से मैं बच्चे वगैरह हो गए इनके अंदर तो और सुधार आ गया है कि ये मतलब अपना बच्चों को पढ़ाने के साथ साथ अब तो मेरे मतलब कॉलोनी के बच्चों को भी पढ़ाती है, उनको भी ट्यूशन देती है। और उन सबको पढ़ाने के बाद में जब ये होता है कि घर का सारा काम भी खत्म हो गया, हम लोग सबने खाना भी खा लिया, फिर रात में ये बैठती है, अपनी पढ़ाई करती है, अपनी भी तैयारी कर रही है, अपना भी जो है टीचर की तैयारी कर रही है। मतलब हर तरीके से डेडिकेटेड है बच्चों के प्रति, अपने हेल्थ के प्रति और अपने कैरियर के प्रति, हर तरीके से। और बहुत अच्छे से रहा। अभी तक 6 साल की लाइफ जो है बहुत अच्छी रही।
So I hope with these two stories from Cindy and from Alka saying that our patients are also feeling empowered and they're also feeling the hope that what treatment, early diagnosis and treatment can do. And Cindy, before I close this session, a quick question. Do you have any closing thoughts or any one message or one advice that you would like to give our patients?
Oh, wow. Stay positive. I think being diagnosed is one of the most frightening things in the world. And it's incredibly, it's a lonely and hard diagnosis, but if you don't have treatment, you have to stay positive because it's what's going to get you through your life. And if you do have treatment, you can turn that around and you can help others. And I know personally for me, it's helping others that has helped me to cope with my disease.
Thanks, Cindy. Thank you so much again for joining us. And now I would like to turn over the session to Nisha, Dr. Venugopal, for announcing about our Art for Rare program.